A simple woman was kicked out of a jewelry store. Unaware she's a low-profile millionaire. She bought the place the next day. She walked into the upscale wristwatch and jewelry store in a plain blue top and jean pants, just a few days shy of her birthday. She had come to gift herself something special, something that shimmered. But the moment she stepped in, the staff barely spared her a glance. Minutes passed before a salesman finally approached, wearing a scornful smirk. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone soaked in condescension. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could respond, he turned away, drawn to another customer he deemed more promising. Her heart sank. It wasn't just about the watch anymore. It was the sting of being treated like she didn't belong. What they didn't know. She was a quiet millionaire who valued humility and simplicity. The store exuded wealth, from the marble floors to the gilded accents along the shelves, from the strategically placed chandeliers that spilled warm light onto flawless glass counters to the staff whose suits were tailored to a corporate precision. Each timepiece was more than just a watch. It was a statement, a story wrapped in stainless steel or rose gold, ticking behind sapphire crystal. And amid all this glitz, Becky stood out, not because of any flaw or disruption, but because she didn't shine the way they were used to. Her beauty was understated, her energy gentle, her movements unhurried. She moved like someone who had nothing to prove, someone who was there for a reason deeper than display. But to the staff trained to spot potential, she simply faded into the background. She strolled past the first glass counter, where a dozen watches sat like crown jewels, each labeled with a price tag meant to intimidate. One caught her eye. A slim, elegant watch with a mother-of-pearl dial and a fine leather strap, both bold and graceful in its design. She leaned in slightly, admiring the craftsmanship, the intricate way the hands glided around the face. It wasn't just about the brand or the glitter, it was about the thought behind the design. She loved things that were made with intention. Still, no one approached her. She could feel their eyes occasionally flick toward her, not out of curiosity or interest, but with that quick, dismissive glance one gives a window shopper who clearly won't buy. She turned and continued walking slowly through the store, passing a display of gold-plated bracelets, then a row of limited-edition timepieces encased in dark velvet-lined drawers. Her footsteps were soft, her presence quieter than the low instrumental music humming through the speakers. She didn't need to be loud. Her life had taught her that real power doesn't always come wrapped in noise. As she reached the center of the store, where a large circular counter stood like a throne surrounded by loyal subjects of diamond-encrusted accessories, she paused. It was then that one of the salesmen, a tall man in an overly starched shirt and glossy shoes, finally decided to engage. He approached, his expression unreadable but his energy unmistakably cold. He looked her over quickly, as if scanning her outfit for a brand logo that might redeem her appearance. "What can I do for you?" he asked, the smile on his lips failing to reach his eyes. His tone was professional, but only just. She sensed the pause before his approach, the hesitation, the subtle calculation of whether she was worth the time. She had just begun to reply, her voice calm and warm. "I was hoping to see some of your," when a sharp movement caught the salesman's attention. A woman in red stilettos and an expensive designer bag had entered the store, her perfume announcing her presence before her heels clicked on the polished floor. Without a word of excuse, without even an acknowledgement of interruption, the salesman turned his back and walked away, leaving Becky mid-sentence, mid-thought, mid-moment. He greeted the other woman with a smile that was suddenly full of light, ushering her toward the display case with an enthusiasm that had been so blatantly withheld just moments before. Becky stood still for a second, processing the moment not with outrage, but with that deep, silent ache of invisibility. The sting wasn't new. She had been overlooked before, in meetings, in restaurants, in places where judgment arrived quicker than understanding. It didn't make it hurt less. She took a deep breath, adjusted the small leather purse on her shoulder, and turned to leave. No one tried to stop her. No one noticed. Outside, the air was warm, and the late afternoon sun cast gold over the sidewalk. Becky walked slowly down the street, her reflection trailing alongside her in the luxury store windows. She wasn't angry. In fact, she was grateful. Life had always shown her what people truly valued, and this time, it had handed her a crystal-clear lesson. She had spent years building her business, one quiet deal at a time. Real estate, tech imports. Always under the radar, always letting the spotlight shine on others while she focused on the numbers. She had learned that silence didn't mean weakness. Often, it meant control. And though she lived simply, dressed simply, and spoke simply, her bank account was anything but. She thought of her father then, a quiet man who used to say, "If people judge you by what you wear, let them. You'll know exactly who they are." That memory softened the edge of the experience. But still, it stirred something in her, something that said, do more than just walk away. As she drove home, the city lights began to flicker to life. Traffic hummed along, people bustled about, and the world carried on, unaware that a decision was being made that would alter the future of one luxury store. That night, in the comfort of her minimalist apartment, warm lighting, a single vase of fresh lilies on the table, Becky opened her laptop and logged into her investment dashboard. She made 2 phone calls, short and direct. The first was to her lawyer. The second was to a property management firm. The building housing the watch store had been listed quietly for sale several months ago. She'd seen the listing. She hadn't acted on it then. But now? Now she was interested. Her decision wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving a point. It was about taking back the narrative. About creating a space where people were seen, regardless of the shoes they wore or the bag they carried. She didn't want to embarrass anyone. She wanted to build something better, something different. But first, there had to be a reckoning. Not of anger, but of accountability. The morning sun gleamed over the polished windows of the high-end wristwatch and jewelry store, casting golden light across the sidewalk like an invitation. Inside, the usual buzz of daily activity hummed to life. Staff moved briskly, unlocking display cases, adjusting velvet cushions beneath diamond-studded bracelets, polishing glass counters until they sparkled. The scent of fresh espresso from the boutique cafe next door mingled with the delicate perfume sprayed near the entrance. Everything was poised, pristine, expectant. It was just another day, or so they thought. Across the street, idle conversation among passers-by slowly quieted as heads began to turn. The soft, purring growl of a powerful engine echoed between the buildings. A royal blue Bugatti, polished to a mirror-like finish, cruised into view and glided to a stop in front of the store. Its arrival was like the entrance of a symphony's final note, impossible to ignore, undeniably commanding. The car idled for a moment, drawing stares, before the driver's side door opened with gentle elegance. Out stepped Becky. The heels of her stilettos touched the ground with quiet assurance. She wore a sleek, fitted black dress that hugged her figure without demanding attention, elegance in its purest form. Her hair was pinned in a low, glossy chignon, not a strand out of place. Around her wrist shimmered a single, tasteful watch, one of quiet sophistication, not flashy indulgence. She wore confidence like it was woven into the fabric of her very being. Her walk was poised, deliberate, and unhurried, not because she needed time to think, but because she owned the space now literally and figuratively. From inside the store, a few of the salespeople noticed her first, nudging each other with raised brows and curious expressions. The woman looked familiar, but in a store that served celebrities and socialites, familiar faces were common. Yet something about her, the car, the calm in her stride, the absence of any need to impress, something felt different. The manager, Mr. Clark, was already halfway to the front entrance when the suited man emerged from the passenger side of the Bugatti, holding a black leather folder against his chest like a sacred text. He followed Becky in silence, stepping in line just behind her. As Becky crossed the threshold into the store, everything seemed to slow. Conversations paused. The background music, elegant and ambient, played on, but no one truly heard it. The same floor she had walked days before, unnoticed, unwelcomed, now seemed to lay itself out before her like a carpet. The same staff who had barely lifted their eyes last time now stared, transfixed, trying to piece together what they were witnessing. Mr. Clark straightened his tie and smoothed the front of his jacket, confusion tightening around his eyes. He stepped forward with a forced smile, the kind used when your instincts tell you you're about to lose control, but you're hoping you're wrong. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, voice uncertain, eyes scanning her face for clues. "Welcome to." Becky raised a hand gently, silencing him, not out of rudeness, but with the natural authority of someone who no longer needed introductions. The man behind her stepped forward, opened the leather folder, and handed Mr. Clark a set of crisp documents. At first, the manager accepted them casually, but as his eyes skimmed the top lines, the color began to drain from his face. It was all there. Signed. Sealed. Official. Ownership transfer. Complete. The boutique had a new proprietor, and she was standing right in front of him. "I'm your new boss," Becky said, her voice soft but unwavering, like velvet wrapped around steel. Gasps fluttered through the store like a gust of wind. Two sales associates glanced at each other, mouths parted. One of the junior staff turned a shade paler, recalling too vividly the day she had been ignored, unhelped, invisible. A thin thread of whispers started winding its way through the room. The woman in the jeans. The one we thought was, the realization settled over them like a fog. The same woman they had dismissed had now returned, not with a complaint, not with anger, but with the very deed to the ground beneath their feet. Becky stepped farther into the store, her eyes moving slowly across the counters, the lighting, the team frozen in awkward formation. "You remember me," she said gently, almost as if giving them permission to admit it. "I was here a few days ago." No one responded. No one had to. The shame was collective and loud in its silence. "I was interested in a birthday gift," she continued, running her fingers lightly over a nearby glass case. "But I was judged by what I wore, not by who I was." She wasn't raising her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence now carried more weight than volume ever could. Mr. Clark opened his mouth to speak, but there were no words that could dress up what had happened. Nothing that would excuse it. Becky didn't let him struggle long. She turned to the man beside her, gave a small nod, and he began handing sealed letters to the staff, termination notices. One by one, they accepted the envelopes, eyes wide, breath caught. For some, it was disbelief. For others, a slow-burning understanding of consequences long overdue. Still, Becky didn't gloat. There was no triumph in her eyes, no satisfaction in watching the fallout. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. This was truth reclaiming its place. She turned toward the far end of the store, where a new display had just been installed. Soft lights illuminated a small pedestal with a single, elegant timepiece atop it. She approached, looking down at the watch, not for its diamonds or its brand, but for the artistry, the silent rhythm it kept, ticking away, no matter who noticed. Behind her, the manager tried once more. "We're sorry," he said, softly, his pride barely stitched together. "We didn't mean." She faced him again, calm as the dawn. "You did mean it. That's the point." And with that, she gestured toward the entrance, signaling the end. Mr. Clark hesitated for a moment, then walked out without another word, the door clicking closed behind him. Becky looked around the store, breathing in the silence left behind. A few customers who had wandered in during the scene watched from a respectful distance, unsure whether they had witnessed drama or destiny. She smiled at one of them, a young woman in sneakers and a hoodie who gave her a small, knowing nod. Within minutes, Becky began directing the suited man to make calls. A hiring agency, a design consultant, a small, local PR firm known for their ethical branding campaigns. The store would be closed for a week. Rebranded. Reopened. Under new management, yes, but more importantly, under new values. She walked slowly through each section, imagining how it could feel warmer, more human, more inclusive. The luxury would remain, but the arrogance would not. She wanted her store to whisper welcome into every corner, to see people not for what they wore but for who they were. Because real elegance wasn't about gold or glitter. It was about grace. And now, she had the power to build that vision from the ground up. She returned to the center of the store, where the glass circle display stood like a crown jewel. She placed a hand on the cool surface, letting her reflection stare back at her. The woman who had once been invisible was no longer looking for validation. She didn't need to prove her worth. She was the worth. Outside, the sun had risen higher, casting stronger light into the boutique, illuminating every surface with quiet fire. Pedestrians passed by, a few peeking incuriously, drawn by the parked Bugatti and the strange electricity in the air. Becky glanced at her watch. The time was right. Everything, finally, was right. The morning light filtered gently through the tall windows of the store's newly transformed office space. The once sterile white walls had been repainted in soft earth tones, calming and elegant, and the sharp metallic fixtures had been replaced with warm, ambient lighting that danced across soft wooden floors and subtle gold accents. It no longer felt like a place meant to intimidate. It felt lived in, intentional, welcoming. The heart of the store had shifted, and the energy inside reflected it. Becky sat at her new desk in the corner of the space that had once been little more than a managerial bunker. It had since been turned into an extension of the showroom, curated with refined simplicity, an open area where luxury met soul. Her desk, handcrafted from dark walnut wood, bore no logos, no nameplate, no show of status. Only a single, smooth ceramic cup of black coffee, steam curling upward like a slow-moving whisper, and a small framed photo of her and her father, taken long before her wealth was earned, long before the world learned her name. Around her, the quiet sounds of a new beginning unfolded like the rustle of fresh pages being turned. New staff moved with calm professionalism, diverse in appearance and energy, yet united by something deeper. They greeted each other with sincerity, helped one another with ease, and handled each item in the store with care, not just because it was expensive, but because it meant something. These were not people hired for their appearance, or their pedigree, or their proximity to privilege. They were chosen for their heart, their eyes that met others without judgment, and their desire to serve, not perform. Becky watched them quietly, her fingers curled around the warmth of her coffee mug. She didn't speak much in these moments. She liked to observe the way someone adjusted a display case to catch the light just right, or how another gently corrected a misaligned price tag without being asked. These small actions spoke volumes. The store was becoming what she had always imagined it could be, not just a business, but an experience, a place where people came to celebrate their own milestones and where no one was made to feel less than. She stood slowly, setting down her cup and walking with graceful purpose across the room. Her heels made no harsh sound on the wood, only a soft, rhythmic click, like a clock counting moments rather than minutes. As she approached the jewelry section, the staff instinctively parted, not in fear or forced respect, but with the quiet awareness of her presence and the pride they felt in working for her. She smiled at one of the new hires, a young man in his 20s with sleeves of ink on his arms and a gentleness in his voice that clients had already begun to compliment. He returned her smile, nodding slightly before returning to his work with a vintage ring display. The jewelry section had been reimagined too. No longer cluttered with overwhelming glitz, it had been arranged more like a gallery. Each piece given space to breathe, to speak for itself. Necklaces with quiet stories. Rings that looked like promises. Bracelets with subtle rebellion in their design. And watches, dozens of them. Each more than just a timekeeper. Each a reflection of a person's pace, their presence, their pride. Becky's eyes landed on one particular watch, slim, silver, and delicately detailed. The face was a gentle cream tone, with rose gold hour markers and a single diamond embedded where the 12 would be. The strap was soft Italian leather, the stitching fine and flawless. It wasn't loud. It wasn't begging to be noticed. But it was beautiful. In its quiet strength, it mirrored her perfectly. She reached for it, lifting it from its resting place with both care and certainty. Attached to it was a small, handwritten tag, not from a designer, not from a brand, but placed there intentionally by one of the staff who had caught wind of what this purchase would mean. To me, from me. Happy birthday. Becky smiled, a soft, almost wistful curve of her lips. She turned the watch over in her hand, feeling the smooth leather against her skin. She didn't need anyone else to celebrate her today. She didn't need champagne or a crowd or an extravagant gift from someone trying to impress her. This watch was a celebration of her journey, her strength, her quiet refusal to let the world define her by appearances. It was a symbol of time, not the minutes she had lost being dismissed, but the years she had claimed in becoming who she was. She fastened it around her wrist slowly, her fingers practiced and gentle. When it clicked into place, it felt like more than a watch. It felt like a crown. Across the room, her assistant approached with a light knock on the glass door. Becky looked up. "You have a few minutes before the ribbon cutting," the assistant said softly. "Would you like to speak to the staff before we open?" Becky nodded and walked toward the main showroom, her newly adorned wrist catching the morning light as she moved. The staff gathered quickly, forming a semicircle near the entrance. The display windows were covered with rich velvet curtains, waiting to be pulled aside. The grand reopening hadn't been advertised beyond a quiet post on the store's social page, no influencers, no press releases. Becky believed that the people meant to find her store would find it not through noise, but through trust. She looked at her team, a group of individuals she had chosen not by resume alone, but by how they made people feel. People who remembered names, who listened without assumption, who cared about the human story behind each purchase. "I just want to say thank you," Becky began, her voice soft but resonant. "This place, it used to be about image, about the illusion of worth. But we've changed that, and we'll keep changing it. This store isn't just about luxury. It's about truth, about honoring people for who they are, not how they present. Every customer who walks through those doors should feel seen, valued, respected, not just because they might spend money, but because they showed up. The staff nodded, some with subtle emotion in their eyes. They understood. They had felt it too, in other places, in other lives. And now they were part of something healing. The assistant handed Becky a small pair of gold scissors, the kind meant for ceremonial moments, polished and symbolic. She stepped toward the curtain, took one final breath, and with a graceful snip, revealed the storefront to the world again. The velvet fell away. Light flooded in. Passers-by paused. A couple nearby leaned into the window. And soon, the doors opened, slowly but surely, with footsteps echoing into the space. Customers entered, some with curiosity, some with intention, but all were welcomed with warmth, not pretense. As the showroom filled with conversation and admiration, Becky stepped back into her office-turned-gallery space. She returned to her desk, now surrounded by quiet elegance, and picked up her coffee again, still warm. From the vantage point at the corner window, she could see nearly every part of the store. She watched as her team greeted guests with genuine smiles, explained the stories behind the pieces, offered water without being asked. She saw people linger, laugh, look, and more than that, feel. Her gaze drifted down to her watch once more. It ticked on, its rhythm steady. She thought of how time had once been something she chased, deadlines, dreams, the next level of success. But now, time was her companion, her witness. It had brought her full circle. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. It was the same young man with the tattooed sleeves. He held a tray with a single slice of cake on it, chocolate, with a single lit candle. "We thought you should still get a birthday wish," he said, a bit sheepishly. Becky blinked in surprise, then smiled truly, deeply. She stood, took the plate, and looked at the small flame dancing just slightly in the air-conditioned breeze. She didn't close her eyes to wish. She didn't need to, because she already had everything she wanted. As she blew out the candle, the screen of her mind faded into a memory, a younger version of herself standing outside a store just like this, unsure, unacknowledged, but filled with quiet hope. That girl hadn't needed to change. The world had just needed to see her clearly. Now they did. And as the camera in the mind's eye slowly panned outward, rising above the showroom, capturing the light, the people, the pieces, the peace, a voice echoed gently in the space between silence and reflection. Never let anyone make you feel small. Your worth is not in their eyes. It's in your own. If you enjoyed this story and the journey of Becky, her quiet strength, her powerful return, and the elegance with which she claimed her crown, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring narratives like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you feel when Becky walked back into that store in her royal blue Bugatti? How did the ending make you feel? Was it satisfying to see how she chose grace over revenge? Let us know what you think about Becky, the former store manager Mr. Clark, and the new beginnings created with her thoughtful team.
I hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback inspires more epic tales.